Shaq has a PhD and a massive business, but he cannot solve why Titan sent a guard to get 12 stitches. At 10:30 a.m., in an old tracksuit, Shaq wonders if he was wrong to save a dog that hates people. The animal experts all shook their heads and called Titan trash. The biggest problem was the judgment from all the rich people around him. Then Beatrice, who just lost her second job today, knelt down in front of the wild dog. Is it true that only pain can truly understand pain? To understand that moment, you have to go back 3 months. You have to see the man before the dog. You have to see the silence he lived inside every single day. It was 6:15 in the morning in Isleworth, Florida. The sun was not even fully up yet. Inside a huge house with white walls, Shaquille O'Neal stood in his kitchen. His feet were bare on the cold tile floor. He was trying to make coffee. The coffee machine was small. His hands were not. He held the tiny cup between 2 fingers like a man holding a toy. He almost laughed at himself. Almost. Shaq was 7 feet and 1 inch tall. He weighed 325 pounds. His shoes were a size 23. Every doorway in this house had been made wider just for him. Every chair had been rebuilt just for him. And still, somehow, nothing ever felt like it fit right. He walked past a glass case in the hallway. Inside were 4 championship rings. The gold caught the early light. He stopped for a second and looked at them. There was dust on the glass. He did not wipe it off. He kept walking. Outside, his backyard stretched for 3 acres. Green grass, a pool, a full basketball court nobody used anymore. He stepped onto the patio in $15 gym shorts and an old gray shirt. The birds were loud. The wind moved through the trees. But there was no other sound. No people. No noise. Just Shaq and 3 acres of quiet. He sat down on a chair his team had built to hold his size. Even that chair felt small this morning. He looked out at all that empty space and felt something heavy sit on his chest. People saw Shaq and thought about trophies. They thought about money. They thought about a man who had everything a person could want. What they did not see was a man who woke up every day in a house too big for the sound of just one voice. He had built an empire after basketball, business deals, TV shows, a brand worth more than most people could count. He had $400 million sitting in banks and buildings across the country. None of it made his coffee taste any different this morning. Shaq picked up his phone. He always checked it first thing, out of habit more than hope. He scrolled past sports news. He scrolled past nothing that mattered. Then one video stopped his thumb cold. It was a local news clip from a county shelter 2 hours away. The headline said a dog was going to be put down that same week. The story called the dog too dangerous to save. Shaq watched the video twice. The dog in the video was huge. A cane corso, the kind of dog people called a monster, before they ever got close enough to know it. Its fur was matted. Its ribs showed a little too much. It paced back and forth in a small metal cage, growling at anyone who walked near. The shelter worker in the video called the dog unadoptable. She said it had bitten 2 people already. She said the county had scheduled it to be euthanized in 5 days. Something about the dog's eyes stopped Shaq from scrolling past. He remembered being a kid in Newark, New Jersey. He remembered people crossing the street just to avoid walking near him. He was only 12 years old and already 6 feet tall. He remembered teachers calling him too big and too much before they ever learned his name. People had decided who he was before they asked him a single question. This dog was getting the exact same treatment. Big, loud, scary, different. Nobody had asked why. Shaq sat there a long time, just staring at the paused video. The dog's name, according to the shelter file, was Titan. He felt something pull at him. It was not pity. It was recognition. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer before he even finished his coffee. His lawyer's name was Frank Delgado, and he had worked for Shaq for 11 years. Frank picked up on the second ring, already sounding tired. Shaq, it's not even 7 in the morning, Frank said. I need you to look into something, Shaq said. A dog, down at a county shelter near Ocala. There was a pause on the other end. A dog, Frank repeated slowly. A dog that bit 2 people, Shaq said. They're going to put it down Friday. Frank sighed, the kind of sigh a man gives when he already knows he is about to lose an argument. Shaq, listen to me. If that animal has a bite history and something happens on your property, You are looking at a lawsuit that could cost you millions. Your insurance company will drop you. Your neighbors will drop you. This is not like the other dogs you've adopted. Shaq did not answer right away. Frank kept going. You have a foundation. You have a public image built on being the gentle giant. One bad headline about a dangerous dog attacking someone on your property, and years of goodwill disappear overnight. Shaq looked down at his own knees. Years of NBA games had left scars there, thin white lines from old surgeries. His body had taken a beating to get him everything he owned. Now Frank was telling him his body, his image, his whole careful life, might not be strong enough to protect one broken dog. Maybe you're right, Shaq said quietly. He hung up the phone and sat back down in the too small chair. He thought about the dog's eyes again. He thought about being 12 years old and scared and misunderstood. He told himself it was not his problem. He told himself 100 people could handle this better than he could. For 2 days, Shaq tried to forget about Titan. He went to a business meeting about a new restaurant chain. He filmed a commercial for a sports network. He signed papers for a real estate deal worth $11 million. Every hour of those 2 days, some part of his mind drifted back to a cage 2 hours away. A clock was running out. On the third night, he could not sleep. He got up at 2 a.m. and walked out to his empty basketball court. He stood there under the stars, all alone in 3 acres of silence, and he thought about his mother, Lucille. Lucille O'Neill had raised him to believe that size was not power. Kindness was power. She used to tell him that God gave him a big body for a reason. He could stand between trouble and people who could not protect themselves. She never once told him that came with an exception for dogs nobody else wanted. Shaq walked back inside and picked up his phone again. This time he did not call Frank. He called the shelter directly. A tired voice answered. It was a woman named Martha Reyes, who had worked at the shelter for almost 20 years. She told him flatly that Titan had 2 days left. She told him most people who called about Titan hung up the second they heard about the bite reports. I'm not most people, Shaq said. I'm coming down there tomorrow. Martha was quiet for a moment. You know what you're getting into? No, Shaq admitted. But I know what it feels like when people decide who you are before they meet you. The next morning, Shaq drove himself. He did not take his usual driver. He took an old pickup truck from his garage, one he had bought years ago. It was one of the only vehicles where he could actually stretch his legs. He had the front seat pushed all the way back. His head still brushed the roof. He drove 2 hours south, past small towns and long stretches of orange groves. He reached a plain gray building with a chain link fence around it. The county animal shelter did not look like much from the outside. Inside, it smelled like bleach and old fear. Martha met him at the front desk. She was maybe 60 years old, with gray hair pulled back tight, and hands that looked like they had scrubbed 1,000 cages. She did not seem impressed that a famous basketball player had walked through her door. She looked at him the way she looked at everyone, like she was deciding if he was worth her time. You're really here, she said. I'm really here, Shaq said. She led him down a narrow hallway toward the back kennels. The barking got louder with every step. At the very last cage, a massive brown and black dog stood pressed against the back wall. He growled low at every person who walked by. Shaq stopped in front of the cage. He did not speak. He did not smile. He just stood there, quiet, at a respectful distance, and let the dog look at him. Titan growled anyway. See, Martha said. He does that to everybody. Tell me about him, Shaq said. Not the file. The real story. Martha crossed her arms. For a second, Shaq thought she would refuse. Then something in her face softened, just slightly. His first owner kept him locked in a basement, she said. No windows. Dirt floor. Every time Titan barked, the man hit him with a leather belt. We think he was down there almost 2 years before animal control finally got a call. Shaq felt his jaw tighten. He's not mean, Martha said. He's terrified. There's a difference, but nobody wants to take the time to see it. She reached into a drawer behind the front desk and pulled out an old, torn dog collar. The leather was cracked and faded. This is the only thing he had when we brought him in. It's the only thing he's never tried to destroy. Everything else in his kennel, he tears apart within an hour. She handed the collar to Shaq. His enormous hand closed around it gently, like it might break. He doesn't need a trainer, Martha said. He needs somebody who already knows what it's like to be the thing everyone's afraid of. Shaq looked at the collar for a long moment. Then he looked back at Titan, still pressed against the wall, still growling, still scared out of his mind. I'm going to take him home, Shaq said. Martha did not smile. She just nodded once, like she had been waiting years for someone to say those words. The paperwork took almost an hour. Shaq signed form after form, each one making it clear that he alone would carry full legal responsibility for whatever Titan did next. He signed without hesitating once. They loaded Titan into a heavy travel crate in the back of the pickup truck. The dog did not fight. He did not growl. He just stared out through the metal bars the whole ride home, silent. He watched the world go by like he did not trust it. When they finally reached the long driveway of Shaq's estate, a man in a gray suit was already standing there waiting. His name was Gregory Hahn, and he managed the property next door for the Homeowners Association. He had heard, somehow, that Shaq was bringing home a dangerous dog, and he had not wasted any time showing up. Shaq stepped out of the truck first. Before he could even say hello, Titan exploded out of the open crate. The dog moved fast for something so big. He crossed the driveway in seconds and clamped his jaws around the front tire of Gregory's parked car. Rubber tore. Gregory screamed and stumbled backward. Shaq moved without thinking. He stepped his massive body directly between Titan and Gregory, using his size like a wall. He did not yell. He did not grab the dog. He simply stood there, huge and still, until Titan's jaws finally let go of the ruined tire. Gregory stared up at Shaq, pale and shaking. Do you have any idea what you just brought into this neighborhood? I know exactly what I brought home, Shaq said quietly. A scared animal who needs a chance. Gregory did not look convinced. He got back into his car, started the engine on a flat tire, and drove away slowly, glaring the entire time. That night, standing alone in his driveway, with Titan pulling hard on a leash, Shaq understood something clearly. His quiet life, the one full of empty rooms and silent mornings, was already gone. There was no going back now. The next 2 weeks were rough. Shaq hired 3 professional trainers, each one more expensive than the last. The first trainer lasted 4 days, before quitting, saying Titan was simply too far gone. The second trainer tried using strong corrections, and Titan bit him hard enough to draw blood. The third trainer refused to even enter the yard after the first meeting. The first trainer, a young man named Cody, quit after Titan tore through 2 leashes in one afternoon. He said some dogs were simply too broken to fix. He packed his van and left without asking for his final payment. The second trainer used a stronger approach, snapping a metal collar and raising his voice every time Titan hesitated. Titan bit down hard on his wrist during the second session. The man limped away holding his arm, muttering that Shaq had wasted his money on a lost cause. The third trainer, an older woman with decades of experience, walked the property once, looked at Titan's file, and simply shook her head. She said some fear runs too deep for any leash or command to reach. She left before she even opened her equipment bag. Word about the dangerous dog next door spread fast through the neighborhood. At the center of it all was Gregory Hahn, president of the Homeowners Association. He had never liked animals, and he liked new money even less. Gregory sent Shaq an official letter. It said the dog needed to be removed from the property. It said if the dog stayed, Shaq would be fined $10,000 every single day. Shaq read the letter twice, then set it down on his kitchen counter without a word. Then came the night his head of security, a former Marine named Curtis Boyd, tried to move Titan into a covered kennel during a rainstorm. Titan panicked. He lunged, teeth catching Curtis across the forearm. Curtis needed 12 stitches at the hospital that night. That was the moment the hook of this story begins. 10:30 the next morning, Shaq stood in his old tracksuit near the empty kennel, staring at nothing. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Every trainer he had hired called Titan the same word. Trash. Not fixable. Not worth the risk. The worst part was not the dog. The worst part was the judgment on every face around him, from Gregory to his own staff, all of them silently asking the same question. Why would a man, with everything, choose to fight for something everyone else had already thrown away? That same week, A woman named Beatrice Coleman walked up Shaq's long driveway in the middle of the afternoon heat. She was 53 years old. Her shoes were worn thin at the heel. Sweat soaked through the back of her shirt. She had just lost her second job, that morning, a cleaning job at a hotel downtown, after the manager cut her hours without warning. She still owed $4,200 in medical bills from her granddaughter's asthma treatments. Her bank account held exactly $17.42. She had heard, through a cousin, that the O'Neill house needed extra help. She was not proud. She was desperate, and desperation had walked her 2 miles under the hot Florida sun to knock on a stranger's door. Beatrice had worked hard her entire life. She had raised 2 children mostly alone, after her husband passed away young. She had cleaned hotel rooms, cooked in diner kitchens, and folded other people's laundry for over 30 years. She never once asked anyone for a handout. She only ever asked for a chance to work. Shaq answered the door himself. He looked at her tired eyes, her worn shoes, the quiet dignity she carried even while exhausted, and he saw something familiar. He saw his own mother, standing in a hallway years ago, tired from 3 jobs, but never once complaining out loud. He hired her on the spot. No formal interview, no long list of questions. Beatrice did not start cleaning right away. On her first afternoon, she walked out to the yard, where Titan paced behind a tall fence. She simply stood there, watching him from a distance. She did not approach. She did not speak baby talk at him the way most people did. She just watched, quiet and still, for almost 20 minutes. Shaq noticed this on the security camera feed inside his office. He watched a woman he barely knew study his broken dog, with more patience than any trainer he had paid thousands of dollars. The next day, things got worse before they got better. Gregory arrived with 2 police officers at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon, responding to a noise complaint about Titan's growling. The officers stood near the fence, hands resting on their belts, while Titan barked and snapped at the unfamiliar uniforms. Shaq stood between the officers and the fence, his voice low and calm. He used every ounce of control he had learned over decades of pressure. He knew if this moment went wrong, Titan would be gone by nightfall. He held his ground until the officers finally agreed to leave, with only a formal warning. But something inside Titan had changed. That night, the dog stopped eating. He lay curled in the corner of his gold-trimmed kennel, refusing every bowl of food. He was slowly wasting away inside a cage that cost more than most people's cars. Shaq watched the security footage late that night, alone in his office, and felt something break open in his chest. He was losing this fight. He could feel it. 3 nights later, a summer storm rolled into the area harder than anyone expected. Lightning struck a transformer near the property line at 10:47 p.m., and the power across half the estate flickered and died. The automatic lock on Titan's kennel gate, the one wired into the main electrical system, popped open in the darkness. Titan bolted. He tore across the wet grass, panicked by the thunder, and slipped through an open side door into the main house. Beatrice had stayed late that night, finishing up laundry near the kitchen. She turned just in time to see 300 pounds of terrified dog charging straight toward her. She backed into a corner of the hallway. There was nowhere left to go. Shaq heard the commotion from upstairs and came running, his bare feet sliding hard on the wet tile near the back door. He hit the floor and went down, his massive frame crashing into a side table. For one horrible second, he could only watch from the ground. Titan closed the distance toward Beatrice, teeth bared, growling with pure fear. Beatrice did not scream. She did the last thing anyone in that hallway expected. She lowered herself slowly to her knees, right there on the cold tile floor, and made herself small in front of the terrified animal. Then she began to sing. It was an old lullaby, low and soft, the kind sung for generations by grandmothers across the American South. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied, filling the hallway with something gentler than fear. Titan froze mid-stride. His growl faded into a whimper. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his massive head and pressed it into Beatrice's open palm. She kept singing, her hand resting against his matted fur, tears sliding silently down her face. Shaq lay frozen on the floor, watching a moment he would never forget for the rest of his life. Nobody moved for a long time. The storm outside kept rumbling, but inside that hallway, everything felt still. Finally, Beatrice looked up at Shaq, still kneeling on the floor, with Titan's head heavy against her chest. Her voice was quiet and steady. "He doesn't hate people," she said. "He hates the smell of expensive things. Perfume, cologne, fancy soap. Those are the smells that came right before every beating he ever got." Shaq slowly pushed himself up off the floor, careful not to startle the dog again. "I smell like dirt and sweat and dish soap," Beatrice continued. "I smell like his mother probably smelled. Like work. Like somebody who never had time for perfume." Shaq stood there in silence, letting her words sink in. For weeks, he had paid trainers thousands of dollars to fix Titan, with leashes, commands, and strict correction techniques. None of it had worked. It took a tired, broke woman kneeling on a wet floor to show him the truth. Titan did not need training. He needed someone who understood exactly what it felt like to be hurt by people who were supposed to protect you. Shaq crouched down slowly, lowering his huge frame until he was closer to their level. Titan's eyes flicked toward him, wary but no longer frantic. "Thank you," Shaq said quietly to Beatrice. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and gave a tired, small smile. "I just know what it's like to be judged before anybody bothers to ask why." From that night forward, everything between the three of them started to shift. Beatrice began spending her afternoons in the yard, with Titan, always at a respectful distance at first, letting him choose when to come closer. She never used a leash to force him. She never raised her voice. Slowly, day by day, Titan began greeting her at the fence instead of hiding from it. Shaq started joining them some evenings, sitting quietly on the grass. Beatrice talked softly to the dog about nothing in particular, just steady, gentle sounds that told Titan he was safe. For the first time, since coming home from the shelter, Titan's ribs stopped showing quite so much. He started eating full meals again. But peace never lasts long when someone like Gregory Hahn is looking for a reason to end it. Gregory had not forgotten about his ruined tire. He also had not forgotten how the storm night sent one more police report onto his desk. He started digging into Beatrice's background, hoping to find some leverage he could use. He found it. 5 years earlier, Beatrice had been arrested for stealing $42 worth of prescription medicine from a pharmacy. It was medicine for her sick grandson, and she had been desperate and out of options that week. She had pled guilty, paid a fine, and never been in trouble again. But the record still existed, sitting quietly in a county database, waiting for someone cruel enough to use it. Gregory used it. He showed up at Shaq's door with a printed copy of the arrest record in his hand. He wore a thin smile, like a man who already knew he had won. "You have a convicted criminal working in your home," Gregory said. "Around a dangerous animal, no less. I think the board would be very interested to hear about this." Shaq's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "She stole medicine for a sick child 5 years ago. She's paid for that. The board won't see it that way," Gregory said. "Fire her, surrender the dog to county control, and this all goes away quietly. Otherwise, I go to every news outlet in this state, and your reputation takes the hit, not mine." Gregory turned and walked back to his car, leaving the ultimatum hanging in the humid afternoon air. That night, Shaq sat alone in his office for hours, staring at nothing. He thought about protecting his image, the empire he had built brick by brick since retirement. Firing Beatrice and giving up Titan would make the entire problem disappear within a single phone call. He also thought about his mother's voice, telling him a long time ago that his size was never meant to protect his own comfort. It was meant to protect people who had nobody else standing in their corner. He picked up his phone and made a different kind of call. Not to Frank the lawyer, not to Gregory. He called an old friend from his playing days who now worked as an investigative accountant. Within 3 days, Shaq had built a very different kind of file. It turned out Gregory Hahn did not just manage properties. He also owned a small chain of pet supply companies. Those same companies had quietly evaded over $1,200,000 in state taxes over 4 years. Shaq requested a special hearing with the Homeowners Association Board, the very same board Gregory had threatened to turn against him. The hearing took place on a Tuesday evening in the community clubhouse. Folding chairs sat in careful rows, filled with a dozen skeptical neighbors, arms crossed tight. Gregory stood at the front in a crisp navy suit, holding a stack of papers detailing every incident report involving Titan. He read the numbers out loud, one by one. Bite reports. Property damage. A guard requiring 12 stitches. He painted a picture of pure danger, and the room nodded along with every word. Then it was Shaq's turn to speak. He did not walk to the front dressed like a celebrity. He wore old work boots and a plain welder's jacket. It was the same kind of clothing his mother wore on double shifts back in Newark. He carried a thin folder under one arm. He set the folder down on the table without opening it right away. "Before I say anything else," Shaq said, his voice calm and even, "I want you all to meet the dog you're afraid of." He nodded toward the door. Beatrice stepped inside, Titan walking calmly beside her. No leash, no collar pulling him along. The room went completely silent. A few people gasped and pulled their chairs back. Titan walked straight past every stranger in that room, tail low but steady, and lay down quietly at Beatrice's feet. He rested his massive head on top of her worn shoes and let out a slow, contented breath. Nobody in that room said a word for several long seconds. Shaq finally opened the folder on the table. Inside were copies of financial documents, the results of the investigation his friend had pulled together. He explained, calmly and without anger, that this man demanding a dog be destroyed also ran companies accused of years of financial fraud. 2 former employees claimed those same companies also mistreated animals kept on their commercial properties. Gregory's face drained of all its color. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The confident, sharp voice from moments earlier had completely disappeared. "I'm not here to destroy anybody," Shaq said quietly, looking around the room. "I'm just asking you to look at the whole story before you decide who deserves a second chance and who doesn't." The board members exchanged glances. One by one, they looked down at Titan, calmly resting at Beatrice's feet, radiating none of the danger the reports had described. Slowly, without a single vote needing to be called, the mood in the room shifted completely. Gregory gathered his papers with shaking hands and left the clubhouse without saying another word. One neighbor, an older man who had lived next to Shaq for years, without ever saying much, stood up slowly from his folding chair. He walked over to Beatrice and knelt down carefully to pet Titan's broad head. He told her his own son had once been written off by teachers as too much trouble, too loud, too difficult to reach. He said watching Titan rest so calmly reminded him that people and animals are rarely as simple as a file full of complaints. Other neighbors nodded along, some wiping quiet tears from the corners of their eyes. A woman near the back offered to help fund small kennels for future rescue dogs. She said she wanted to be part of something good instead of something fearful. By the time the folding chairs were stacked away, that night, the room had changed completely. The same people who had gathered to condemn Titan were now his first fans. 3 months passed after that quiet, powerful night. Shaq stood at the edge of a wide, green piece of land just outside the city, land he had purchased and turned into something new. A hand-painted wooden sign near the entrance read "Soul Full Rescue Station," with a smaller sign underneath showing a simple black and brown dog silhouette. Titan had become the unofficial mascot of the entire rescue. He greeted every new, frightened animal with the same calm patience Beatrice had once shown him. Dogs who came in shaking and snapping at strangers somehow settled faster whenever Titan lay quietly nearby. Beatrice walked out from the main office building wearing a clean uniform with her name stitched over the pocket. Her official title now read Executive Director. It came with a steady salary, large enough to finally erase every dollar of medical debt hanging over her family. Her grandson had moved in with her the month before. He was sleeping soundly for the first time in years, in a room that was fully his own. Shaq handed her a folder as they stood together near the front gate. Inside was a check for $4,217.83. It was the exact amount needed to close out the last of her old medical bills. There was also a signed long-term employment contract securing her position for years to come. Beatrice looked down at the check, then back up at Shaq, her eyes glassy, with tears she refused to let fall completely. Her hands, rough from decades of hard work, trembled just slightly as she held the folder close to her chest. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. "Neither did you," Shaq said. "You knelt down in front of a dog everybody else had already given up on." Titan trotted over and pressed his large head against Beatrice's leg. Then he leaned into Shaq's hand as it reached down to scratch behind one ear. Shaq crouched low, folding his huge frame down until he was level with both of them. He wrapped one arm around Beatrice's shoulder and rested his other hand gently on Titan's back. For years, Shaquille O'Neal had walked through a world built too small for his body. Big houses, big rooms, big empty silence, every single morning. Standing there on that open land, surrounded by barking dogs finding new homes, Shaq felt something new. Beside him stood a woman who had refused to look away from pain simply because it looked dangerous. Shaq finally felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he fit, not because the world had gotten bigger, because he had finally found the exact right place, with the exact right people, for a heart as large as his had always been. Somewhere behind them, a new dog barked nervously in one of the intake kennels, freshly arrived and still afraid of every sound. Beatrice glanced over, already moving toward the noise, before Shaq could say a word. He watched her walk away, calm and steady, the same way she had walked toward Titan on that stormy night. Some people spend their whole lives searching for power. They chase money, fame, and big houses full of empty rooms. Shaq had finally learned that real power was quiet. It knelt down. It listened. It smelled like dirt and dish soap, not perfume. And it never, ever walked away from something broken.